Moon, a space rock floating outside of our backyard, or mystical force that drives supernatural energy. Either way you look at it, it's fascinating in its own way. I mean, just look at all the love songs that use moon as a metaphor for something beautiful or something unreachable, unattainable. Many poems were written in the name of the moon, and many hearts were broken. Then you moon, if I could have my way with you, I would have blown you away. And the last part was not even a joke. We were very close to that reality, the moon being blown away. Well, that is if it was left in the hands of the scientists who were in charge of the project A119. Project A119, also known as a study of lunar research flights, was a top secret plan developed by United States during the Cold War to, and get this, detonate a nuke on the moon. This idea might sound like something out of a science fiction movie, but it was a very real plan that was considered by the US government. The idea behind the Project A119 was quite simple: to show the world that the United States had the capability to launch a nuclear missile into the space, and that the US was a dominant superpower in the Cold War. The project was proposed by the US military air force in the late 50s, and it was ultimately cancelled before it was executed. But let's take a closer look at what exactly entailed in Project A119, why it was proposed, and what ultimately led to its cancellation. In the late 1950s, the US was engaged in a fierce space race with Soviet Union. Both countries were competing to reach various space milestones, such as launching a first satellite into the orbit or sending first human into the space. At the same time, the Cold War was in full swing. The tensions between Soviet Union and the US were an all-time high. The two superpowers were engaged into a global struggle for power, with each side trying to outdo the other in terms of military strength or some technological prowess. It was against this backdrop that US came with the idea for Project A119. The goal was to demonstrate US superiority by detonating the nuclear bomb on the surface of Moon, which would create a visible explosion from the Earth. I can already imagine a military hothead selling this idea to his colleagues and scientists alike. Okay guys, listen up. We've been in this game with Soviet Union for quite some time, playing cat and mouse. We do something, they do that, but more. Then we score against them, and then they came back on top. Well, I say, why don't we do something so outrageous that even they will think twice before trying it? Let's nuke the moon! And the crowd erupts in cheers. In all seriousness, it went a bit different than that. The project was initially proposed by a group of scientists at the Air Force's Air Research Development and Command in the 1950s. The scientists believed that detonating nuclear weapon on the moon would have several benefits for the US, including demonstrating American technological superiority, intimidating Soviet Union, and somehow boosting morale amongst the US population. However, the idea was controversial from the start. Many scientists and policymakers were concerned about several things, so let's get through to some of them. Despite the initial enthusiasm for Project A119, it was ultimately cancelled before it was even executed. And there are several reasons for this. One of the main factors was concern about the potential environmental impact of a nuclear explosion on the moon. Scientists feared that the explosion could damage the lunar environment, which could have long-term effects on future scientific research of the moon as well as explorations of the moon. Another factor was potential political fallout from the project. Many policymakers were concerned that other countries may see this US move as a rather aggressive and provocative move, which could damage diplomatic relations with other countries and potentially lead to war. And finally, there were concerns about technical feasibility of the project. The scientists working on the Project A119 quickly realized that there were several significant technical challenges about launching a nuclear weapon into the space and then detonating it on the moon. Like, really? Who thought that would be difficult? involved. There were also concerns about potential risk to human life if something went wrong during the detonation. In the end, all of these factors contributed to the cancellation of the project A119. The US government ultimately decided that the risks and potential negative consequences far outweighed potential benefits of the project. And the project was eventually scrapped due to these concerns about the potential consequences of such detonation. The scientific and technical feasibility of the plan was established, but potential geopolitical ramifications were far too great to ignore. The Soviet Union, which already by that time launched a first artificial satellite, Sputnik, in 1957, could easily interpret the nuclear detonation on the moon as an aggressive act by the US. It could lead to the escalation of the Cold War and would potentially lead to a nuclear conflict that would then have catastrophic consequences on both sides and the world as a whole. Furthermore, the scientific benefits of the project were also quite questionable. While it could provide a valuable information about the composition of the moon, the potential benefits were outweighed by the risks and costs involved, because the same information could be gained by other, less risky means. In the end, the US decided to focus on other space-related projects such as program Apollo, which successfully landed humans on the moon in 1969. While Project A119 still remains as an example of Cold War era secrecy and ambition, it also serves as a reminder of importance of considering the potential consequences of scientific and technological advancements. But let's be real, the idea of detonating a nuclear bomb on the moon is just too wild not to make fun of. So here are some potential consequences that scientists might have overlooked. Congratulations, scientists! You have successfully turned a beautiful, glowing and mysterious surface of the moon into a radioactive wasteland. What a great way to destroy our one and only natural satellite that has fascinated us for centuries. We are sure the future generations will thank you for it. After the explosion, Moon gains nuclear powers and decides that it no longer wants to be part of Earth's orbit. It demands independence. It sets its own lunar government, complete with its own constitution and laws. Earthlings are now prohibited from visiting the Moon without visa, which is notorious for being hard to get by. Somehow the nuclear explosion has turned the Moon into a giant disco ball. It now reflects colorful lights and is visible from the Earth every other night. Now, while this may sound like a harmless consequence, it causes widespread insomnia and a decrease in productivity around the world, as people can't resist the urge to dance the night away. You didn't think I was gonna dance? Like, come on, let's be real. Oops! Turns out the explosion was a little bit too powerful and the Moon has completely disappeared. It's now floating somewhere deep into space and who knows where it went. Now this leads to a widespread panic and conspiracy theories, with some even claiming that Moon was never real in the first place. While these consequences are obviously exaggerated and unlikely, they do serve as a reminder of potential unintended consequences of scientific experimentation. It's important to carefully consider both the risks and benefits of any project, especially when it involves use of powerful and destructive technologies. In conclusion, Project A119 was a fascinating, if not misguided, attempt at pushing boundaries of scientific and technological innovation during the height of the Cold War. While the idea of detonating a nuclear bomb on the Moon might sound ridiculous in retrospect, it does speak about the bold and ambitious spirit of the era. As we continue to push the boundaries of space exploration and scientific advancements, it's important to remember the lessons of Project A119. We must always consider the potential consequences of our actions and strive to use technologies and knowledge for the betterment of humanity. And then maybe, just maybe, we can avoid turning Moon into a giant disco ball. That's it for me for today. Hopefully I'll see you next week or maybe sooner. See ya.